Ready? Aim!
There's too many!
Anyone see my mammoth?
Stubby! There we go. Right, yes. I realised you couldn't hear me there. That's my fault. In the changes, I had completely failed to set my audio settings. Cool. Loki Priest says this is going to be the best episode ever because you can hear me. Great, thanks, Loki. Right, anyway, I'm back. I know we missed out last week. In case you can't tell, this is not my normal space, right? Those of you who probably noticed, there's a bit of a change. There's never normally a door behind me and a bunch of boxes. Yes, I've moved house last week, hence the reason no episode. Now, there will be no dog woofing that you'll be out here. And I'll be able to just do everything quietly. You'll have to ignore the boxes of... this is all moving boxes, and I think like maybe 3 or 4 of these boxes are purely modelling things nearly entirely for song. Pretty sad. But yeah. Greyjoy's OP, please nerf. That's what someone's saying there. Yes, indeed, Naktalb. Very true. Alright. Yeah. Let's dive in and talk about what's happened. So, it's been a weekend. We saw the largest Song of Ice and Fire event ever hosted, ever put on. Played over the weekend in Poland. 171 players is what they had on the day. 171, I believe, turned up for the event. Obviously, you know, before we dive into anything else, that's obviously the biggest event ever run, and it's also very respectable in that they were looking at 180, and you know, we always work on the basis of around about 10% dropouts when you talk about a physical event, and that's just because 10%, you know, problems with like getting there, travel issues, which we'll talk about briefly, they always happen, they always occur, and you're always going to have some element of people dropping out because of that. Hello, Data Lincoln. And hey, everyone else, by the way, who's in the chat. Wait, the best member of the stream won't be here? I guess I'll leave. Thanks, your vote of confidence really makes me feel great. Joking. You're fine. We had this massive event, 171 players. As I say, better than what you'd expect. You know, that 10% dropout, you'd expect maybe he's down at 160 players maybe on the day. But 171 is a fantastic outcome and does make it the largest event. So, let's first of all talk about kind of like what happened, what didn't happen, all of that stuff. So, I think first thing to mention is for those of you who weren't aware, and I know that a lot of the patrons in chat were aware, and some of the people over on the Song of Ice and Fire Stats Discord, Stats NRG Discord, Carlo couldn't make it. We had a massive storm in the UK on Thursday and Friday, and unfortunately at Leeds Airport, which is where Carlo was flying from, the a plane. I saw the news on the Friday morning. A plane had literally like landed and run off the end of the runway in the horrific weather, the wet weather, and everything like that. And they had to close they basically closed the airport after that. No one was injured or anything like that, I believe. There's no like problems or anything, but they didn't feel safe with vehicles and aircraft leaving. And that meant that not only was Carlo's flight delayed, it was actually cancelled. So Carlo's flight was cancelled, and therefore Carlo did not attend Polish national championships, which is obviously what he was looking to do. And some of us, especially from those who couldn't play, we were hoping to watch certainly how his escapades will have done off the back of his fantastic season in the UK, winning all of our GTs here in the UK. So that's the first thing. Second thing, we did have some UK players make it over. Marky Mark, Jacob, Peter, and a guy called PC who I don't actually know his full name. So just goes by part-time villain stats. And Matt Lloyd was over as well. And Pascal Augmo, he was over as well. So yeah, it was good that we got some UK players across, which is fantastic. And it wasn't just only the UK as well. There were other players from across the continent: Greeks, Hungarians, Spanish. I don't actually remember if a German. I think there were some Germans to go. Oh, the Finnish and Swedes were there, of course. What about those? Titus, Philippe. He was over there as well from France. I think, yeah, we didn't get any Germans attend the event in the end. A bit of a shame, but alas, tickets and everything as they are understandable. So, loads of nations represented. And if you haven't seen, the winning nationality was Spain. That means, actually, apart from Spanish nationals, which had not had many international players at it, and this year's UK nationals with Carlo, very few national events like these, like I think Spanish nationals, maybe Italian nationals as well, actually, now I think about it. But in terms of the really big ones, like the 60-plus player events, very few of the 60-plus player national events have been won by a person of that nation hosting, unless there's been very few or incredibly limited external participants. The only other one I was thinking there, obviously Spanish nationals had very few last year and this year, I believe. And I think French nationals this year had very few. I'll double check. Oh. French national champion 2023. I don't know if they got many national. Oh, they got. Oh, that's the top 8. Oh, they got some. I lied. They got a good mix there, actually. To be fair. So yeah, no. There's I shouldn't really. That's not a very that shit. All right. So yeah, I mean, what is interesting though is the Polish nationals not won by a poll, and that's after 2 years of English nationals being won by a poll, which is hilarious. So. You start a trend with raiding different countries' nationals. Yeah, it wasn't just me. I didn't start that trend. The polls definitely started that with LGT a couple of years back. So yeah, that's definitely a common theme. So yeah, Polish nationals won by Raul Plana Garcia, Palmerno as he goes by, and I've probably butchered that. Mikel will tell me off, no doubt. He's actually he's Mikel's flatmate. He does play and train with Mikel a little bit, I believe, and they talk about the game a lot as well. So congratulations to Raul. Obviously a fantastic result, pulling it with a Greyjoy win. Well, we'll talk about lists and we'll talk about stats and everything in a minute. I want to go through a few little things, and these are little things. Unfortunately, Sophie wanted to be on an episode, but unfortunately couldn't make it today. So a few things that she'd mentioned from her experience there. She was judging at the event, didn't play, but was a active judge. Out of all of them, only 10 tables didn't have space left for tactics boards. Last year, that was an issue at most tables. So, in terms of the space, they had space for tactics boards, which is good. From my experience, there was enough space between rows of tables to walk to your table without bigger issues, which is improvement on last year as well, where there wasn't enough space to kind of walk down the alleys. The venue had good ventilation, no issues with getting too hot. Kind of loud. People playing in middle tables had it worse, so it was still loud. That's what you expect at these big events. And the ventilation thing is an interesting one because that was we played at the Athletic Centre in the UK. It gets surprisingly warm. Like, it's a big venue with large ventilation. You do get very warm, and it was noticeable. Last year, French nationals that they held in the hall, I didn't notice getting warm in the same way, and they seem to have, like, say, fixed that with the venue this year, which is great. Sophie expected a lot more rules queries. You think on average it would come down to about 15 to 25 questions asked per whole round. That was like, if you think of 171 players playing, that's going to be 85 tables playing. So in 85 games, they were talking maybe 15 to 25 questions at most, kind of like per round, and that's like you're averaging between 25. Ranging. So, that's not that many questions in the grand scheme of things. And she was saying that maybe the release of the FAQ helped that. So a potential like little plus for people if you're going to host a nationals event, releasing a formalized FAQ, even if it is just kind of a list of questions that you've had asked with some question answers next to them, is probably a good idea. And that will probably go a long way, or at least help going a long way to kind of resolve those first line issues. Not a lot of arguments between players, which I know sounds like a weird thing to mention. About 3 big arguments during games. Most of my friends said it was all. Yeah, so a lot of people had chilled games. Very few kind of like disagreements and arguments in that sense. I do know of one, which I probably won't touch on today, between Marky Mark and Gratka. But apart from that, very few kind of like things like that. Which is good. I was actually talking with some people in Discord before this as well, and a lot of kind of arguments or a lot of those kinds of issues stem from miscommunication, usually, and usually miscommunication. As someone who has travelled to play Song, miscommunication can be purely because of language barriers, and I'm not saying that anyone's bad Polish or bad English or anything like that, but purely like literally the meaning word can sometimes be slightly differently interpreted. I had it once. I had a kind of a little bit of a language barrier issue with a player that I played against in French nationals, and it was a bit of a disagreement between us. And thankfully, there was a judge. Shabaloo was actually at our table at the time, and he kind of explained it to the other guy, and he was like, "Oh yeah, no, I get it." And it wasn't really a disagreement. It was just a communication. So that happens. We move on, right? Didn't get much feedback about FAQ we created, so they didn't actually get many people responding to the FAQ initially, but a few people mentioned it seemed they were happy that they made it, and it was overall positive feedback from that side of it. So overall, pretty good event from a judge's perspective. Sophie was very happy with how it all went, and the venue was good. She said first time at this venue. Mostly trying to get settled down now. We're aware that people wanted streamed games, which is another thing for improvement. So for next year, they are looking to add in streamed games and recorded games. That was certainly a criticism for a lot of people online. We would have loved to have seen streamed games. The criticism we saw at LGT this year as well. Streamed games are important for growing the game and seeing the game live. If you can't provide them, you can't put them on, then you can't put them on. We're not going to complain that you can't put them on. It's understandable. However, I do recommend if you are looking to run big events, if you can stream games, it really does just add that je ne sais quoi, if you will. And even if it's only 20 or 30 people following along, it allows people to follow along online. a little bit closer, get involved, see the plays, see what games are being played and how they're being played. People love it, and people love watching the games back. Valimore in chat says here, stream games would have been amazing. Yeah. People love watching games. I'm one of the few people who doesn't enjoy watching games that much being streamed and being played. I usually join them in Discord and watch them in Discord because I'm not actually watching them closely. I just enjoy there being some background noise for when I'm doing stuff, and better than having to concentrate on a YouTube video. Or I don't actually enjoy like weird. I don't sometimes enjoy the tonality and like, listening to music. And if I don't listen to music or don't want to enjoy listening to music, putting streams on is helpful. But I don't actually think like myself would have watched the stream games that carefully. But I know that people do love watching them, watching back, seeing plays, seeing how lists work, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, people do like it. People do love to see it, and it is nice to know those streams are there, even if you don't necessarily partake. So that's that. We want there to be streams next year. She says probably also improve communications with referees. I say this year to either shout at us to get our attention or come physically. Yeah. So Sophie's saying there about kind of issues communicating with the refs if you need their attention. One of the big things that we implemented, or I say we, Carlo and Chris implemented at LGT 2 years ago, was red cards. Like you had, and I'll just use this for example. You had a card, usually A4 sized or A5 sized, and if you wanted to grab the attention of the refs, you would hold the card up, and it says, like, look, big red card, I need a judge over here, kind of thing, and the refs will be watching that, the TOs, and they can easily then come over and make an adjudication on the query. They were used so, like, they were out in the LGT this year, and available by the judging team this year. They did have them. I was surprised at the number of people who didn't know what they were for or didn't use. Like, it was surprising. Like, there were times where people would be like turning around and be like, I need a judge. I'm like, shut up, show that. That's what they're there for. And that just to show you partially how little judges were needed, but also how kind of like it was so easy for the judges to generally be there and be available. So yeah, there's a little thing, and I would recommend that for the bigger events, 170 players, you want those kind of red cards. Generally, Sophie thinks they learned a lot from last year, and you can see it much better now, and the venue was 10 times better. Yeah, overall, from Sophie's perspective, unfortunately not able to be here today, she was happy with the event as a whole from a judge and from the organization of like the playing space and what they could have done. Definitely room for improvement, but overall good from her perspective, which is great to hear. So that is that. Now, let's have a look at the results properly. Palermo won the event, running Baylor and Asher. Now, I think it's very worth mentioning here at this point that Palermo never ran his Asher list. He only ran his Baylor list. More on that in a second. Didn't run the Asher. Now let's actually have a look at the Asher. And I'm going to try and predict something. And I'm not a perfect predictor of this, but I'm going to kind of like guess a little bit. We see Silence Men with Asher and Carl. Commander Asher and Carl. We see GCS with Bron. Harlaw Reapers with Baylor. And a unit of Drowned Men with Roderick, Balon, and Varys. Okay. My guess here, he didn't play this list. He didn't play into Martell or didn't play into Free Folk. I think he wants to run that list into Martell and Free Folk. Maybe he's a little bit more. The ranged unit especially giving him the opportunity to pick apart kind of Martell units and have that long range threat. That is what I would initially say was his thoughts there. Can't promise that's perfect. GCC, not GCC. Right, sorry. Golden Company Crossbowmen. Apologies. But yeah, this list was never played at the event. He did run into almost exclusively Lannisters and Knights. So yeah, Anthony talks about 3-list format. I'll talk about that in a minute, Anthony, later on, because it's been being a bit more common, and I know that Data did run a tournament, Cerberus tournament this weekend, as well as the Sunday Slaughter crew. I do have some thoughts on it. A Baylor can be good into free folk if expecting mag due to lash out. Yeah, you're going to run the Baylor potentially if you're running like a giant list. Maybe, yeah. All right, so he did play. I mean, Kevin, Potter, Kevin, John, Rob, John. So he played Night's Watch and Lannister for 3 games each, and played Starks for 1 more. So yeah. I mean, let's have a look in those stats actually. 20% of the field ran Lannister. 18 of the percent of the field running Night's Watch. These numbers are not concerningly high necessarily. Like the pick rate of these things is not like ridiculous. But it is clearly evident that people believe there's power there. Now, this is not kind of like normal fluctuations. The UK, not an event this size anyway, of 170 players. The UK used to see like a 20% appearance rate for Lannisters, or even higher at like 30% appearance rate for Lannisters, because Lannisters have always been a very popular faction in the UK. And Baratheons also used to be pretty high, remembering those days. But like generally speaking, that was in also tournaments of like 20 players, which is 20 to 30 players, which is going to be like more skewed to what local players are playing, generally speaking. 20% is definitely not concerningly high. It's well within the bounds of being normal, not nearly as close to being the kind of 30 or 40% pick rates that you'd expect to see if there was severe imbalances in the game, at like a bigger tournament like this. I think what is interesting though is that Lannisters and Night's Watch are ahead of the pack. Not concerningly so, but certainly they are a lot further ahead of the pack than still neutrals at 2%. I mean, neutrals are in a good spot right now, and I know a lot of people aren't playing neutrals, but it's crazy to think that neutrals are just simply not still played. And that's just not that Lannisters, Night's Watch, or anyone is particularly high, but the fact that the neutral play rate is still abysmally low, I think is crazy, and I think it really moves definitely towards us pointing out that I do think the neutrals aren't a faction. Like I actually do think the neutrals aren't a faction. Like they are now playable. They are completely fine. They are not completely garbage like they were last season. They are actually playable. Can compete with neutrals now. Yet neutrals is still less picked than even Boltons, and Boltons have only just come out, right? And Boltons are awful. They're as bad as neutrals were last patch, and neutrals are less picked than them now. And I think that is indicative of neutrals simply just their player base isn't high. They are not an interesting faction for people to play. We joke about it and we meme about it here on Tourney Ground. Neutrals aren't even unbalanced anymore in terms of like being dog tier. They are just not something people want in the game. They're not people they're just not what people want to play, right? Neutrals aren't a faction, right? It's still the joke, the meme, but like they're just not. People don't want to play them. People don't want to have to think about them. So neutrals, for me, I know that neutral play rate has always been low, but for me that is concerning. I thought more people would want to play neutrals, and the simple truth of the matter is they don't. People do not want to play neutral. So yeah. More on that later, I think. Hopefully. Get onto that. let's have a look at the win rates. Everything is sat. Let's kind of like Lannister, nearly 200 games played. I mean, that's so many games. Avoiding mirrors, of course. That's so many games played across the weekend. 56% win rate. Night's Watch also at 56% win rate. Both factions were also the most picked factions. Both factions also came away with both of the highest win rates. These win rates are not overly high, to be honest. They're not 60+% at 200 games sample size. If there was 60+% at 200 game sample size, then we'd probably be having a bit of a different conversation. 56% is high, but it's not like a concern level of highness. At least not in my book. I think 56% win rate is probably okay. It's fine. It's within the realms of fine. Are Lannisters and Night's Watch probably stronger factions? Yes. They are probably, it's fair to say that they are stronger factions. Are they miles ahead of their competitors? No. They're not miles ahead. They are just the best at the moment. And you know, there has to be a best, right? Like, there is always a best. There has to be a best. They happen to be where it is at the moment. So Lannister and Night's Watch having the better success rates there. We'll look into something else in a minute, where we might be able to say there might be concerns, but we'll talk about that in a second. Greyjoy's at basically 50%, yeah, repping a 3, absolutely fine. Martell's just below it, 49%, no issues there. Targ, Free Folk, and Baratheon all between 45 and 47. Again, no real issues there. That's all within the realms of like normal variation, matchups, all those kinds of things. There's nothing concerning there. Stark's dropping a little bit below at 43%, little bit lower than maybe we would have liked. You know, we want everyone. We always talk like this magic 40 to 60, and if ideally 45 to 55. Starks are just below that 45 limit, but like 43 is not concerningly low. You know, they are probably one of the worst factions in the game right now. They could do with a little bit of love, but then, you know, we see people complaining about Starks, and we'll look at some builds in a minute. Yeah, like Starks are the worst performing faction of the ones we talked about so far, and they're not that far off being in a good spot, like within the realms of where we want them. So yeah, overall across the game, 43 to 56, win rate differentials isn't bad. Like that really isn't bad. That's fine. We then have Bolton's at 39%. Bolton's also heavily skewed by the fact that only 33 games. It's nearly. It's from a smaller segment of players, right? It's going to be more impacted by players and their individual skill, but ultimately Bolton's 39% isn't great. This is outside the kind of 40 to 60 mark that we really kind of ideally want. Not far off the mark, but as we know, Boltons are also not performing well outside of events. Yeah, Boltons are in a sad place, and ironically, neutrals in this event, we saw them not being played very much. They also didn't do well, 37% as well, which does buck the trend of what we see overall stats, where neutrals are doing okay, right? We just jump in to see overall stats at the moment, where at neutrals, we see them repping approximately in Season 3, obviously, I haven't got the last month's data in there, but approximately 55% win rate, which is like completely serviceable. Boltons, on the other hand, if we look at Boltons, we spoke about it, I think, last time we were out. The Bolton win rate is abysmal. Like, oh, it doesn't go ahead. God damn it. But the Bolton win rate truly is I think it worked out to be about 30% or something like that, which is really bad. Yeah. Not great. So Bolton's at 39% had a relatively good showing at 39%. Actually, an improvement for Bolton's as a whole. Not an overall unexpected result though, entirely, in that they are the worst performer. people talk about neutrals in chats. Let's have a look. Boltons were neutral players, says Carl. That's not necessarily untrue. A lot of the Bolton players may have gone from playing neutrals to cross now just playing Boltons. That is true. Neutrals are good. The deck was good before, and they had like 3 buffs. One of the better decks. Yeah, I agree, Data. I like neutrals as a deck. I like the deck. They're not top tier, but yeah, solid. Yeah. They may not own neutrals. I don't know. I think they do own enough neutrals. People have owned enough neutrals in the game for a long time because people, as we will see, can use neutrals and will use neutrals. Color says, like, why would you want to play neutrals other than from a break from the actual factions you own and happen to already have neutrals? That's true. Like, and this actually kind of like plays into the idea, right? Is that if you perceive neutrals as a faction, you're more likely, or you're just, in theory, just as likely to pick them as a faction as you are any of your other factions. Whereas there is probably an already unconscious bias of I own neutrals and like Lannisters and Martells. I'm more likely going to pick Lannisters and Martells because I view them as factions I want to play, whereas I don't really view neutrals as a big faction. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, as people don't really see them as an appealing option because of the opportunities to take those things into the factions, and the other factions are more interesting, so people are more drawn to those factions, which further makes the neutrals feel like not a faction, not really a choice. And yeah, Carlo even backs it up with there's nothing about neutrals. They just have no interest as a faction. They are almost identityless, which is what he says about Targs as well, which I think is fair to say with Targs. Targs being relatively identityless, people don't really know what Targs are supposed to do. So yeah, overall, minus 44, right? Isn't a bad increase. Later. Because I want to go with Stompy, have a chance with both. Fair enough. Maybe Neutral Heroes 3 will have more commanders to use. We'll talk about Neutral Heroes 3, actually, Anthony, later on. Alright then. Tully Cav, people mentioning that. Greyjoys have Silence Men. GCS can be Achilles heel for Greyjoy. Yep, Balin. Oh, awesome. So that's the overall faction ratings. Faction win rates are not too extreme, right? Let's have a look at commanders, and there are a few things here, commanders-wise, which is interesting. Jon Snow pulling out a 69% win rate. There are other commanders up here. High Sparrow with 80%, Brynden with 75, Stannis with 75, Tywin 75. Tywin, Stannis, and the High Sparrow, 4 or 5 games played. If this is a tech list, a one-off tech list being played as like a counter to something, those are good stats. Those are good stats for that tech list. It's clearly working for what it's intended to do, because across 7 games, if there's a one player running Tywin, not running Tywin every game. Similarly with Stannis, similarly with High Sparrow. I haven't looked at the number of picks. Let's have a little look at that, and the number of like occurrence rates. But yeah, I mean, High Sparrow's got 1 pick, Tywin's got 1 pick. And those are the 2 Lancers. Stannis, One True King, has 2 picks. So like, overall, these commanders were not appearing very highly, but it is going to come down to ultimately 1 player in the case of those 2 Lannister commanders. They're doing well. Like, clearly the list is working for what the player has designed the list to do and the way he wants it to work. So, like, well done. I think that Tywin is terrible. So, like, people picking a Tywin list and making it work, kudos. Similarly with the High Sparrow, I don't think the High Sparrow is very interesting. And it's clearly working. And Post says, could you explain the 7th player's Sparrow list? Somewhat unique. Yeah, so I know that one of the players near the top was doing well with the Sparrow list. Which we will look at, because it clearly was doing well, and he was playing it. Brynden Tully Outrider, I'm glad that Brynden Tully Outrider is doing well. I like Brynden Tully Outrider. Don't actually know if he's any good. But, yeah, I'm glad he's doing well. 3 picks, played 8 games. Win rate, cool. Great. Not a huge number of samples, so it's hard to really dive into it. Jon Snow comes in next at 36 games played. 36 non-mirrors, 25 wins out of that, leading to a 69 point whatever percent win rate. 69% win rate is quite high. What's interesting actually about this, and this is kind of like, this is almost the reverse Mance problem, right? Mance was broken. And his win rate was silly, and he would win events, right? He would just win events. He'd do like 2 Mance players, 3 Mance players in Poland last year, and like the top 2 players are both playing Mance. Is stupid. Mance was broken. What's interesting is I don't think Jon is broken. Like, personally, I don't think Jon is broken. I think he's strong, very strong. I don't consider like the Mance list of old, which was virtually impossible to lose with. If when we were talking about playing at a high level, I don't consider the Jon list when played at a high level or the Jon variants, if you will, to be impossible to lose with. I think Jon lists are very beatable, which is really interesting. Perception is very different. So I wouldn't say Jon is an issue. Is 69% win rate an issue? Maybe. Maybe it is an issue. I still don't think Jon is an issue that much. But like 69% win rate over 36 games in a tournament setting like this is high. I think the difference is here, and this is the ultimate truth, there are counters to Jon, right? Jon isn't oppressive like Manson or Old Awful. Yes. Old Awful was, counters existed, but like they were fucking awful. This 69% win rate is high, but I don't think Jon is a concern. And he's not the most common Night's Watch commander, as Carlo points out, and certainly not the highest used, which is interesting. Like 36 games is a decent number of games, but it's not the most, which is really interesting. So he's being played, he's doing well, but he's not broken, and he's also not like a concern or overly played or anything like that. For me, if anything, Jon is the only real big talking point of these stats, and the talking point being he's not even broken. Don't just read that 69% and say that's too high, right? And I do agree. I don't think that's too high, which seems weird because a lot of people might think that it is. But I think it is also fair to say Jon is very strong. Jon is very strong. He may well be the best commander in the game, but not broken, not a concern. We also have Oberyn, Baelor getting decent play. Baelor obviously was played 7 of his 12 games were played by 1 player who happened to win the event, which is really interesting. So 7 games out of 7, Baelor won. Baelor played 12 games, he won 8. So like Baelor wasn't winning games outside of that 1 player and that 1 list. Yeah, Carlo's right. They had huge play rates. Mance and Othel had huge play rates and huge. Yeah. Whereas 36 games from Jon, although it's a lot, it's nowhere near as some of the things we're about to see. It's not even close to some of the other stuff that's being played. And some of the other stuff, I mean, it's just stupid how many games some of the other had. But Baelor, did well. Predominantly rep by 2 players. Steelshanks, 62% win rate across Boltons. This is something worth talking about. Yes, we know the Bolton overall success rate is low. Bolton's only played 33 games that weren't mirrors. Steelshanks won 8 games that weren't. That's not to say that, Steelshanks versus Roos, for example, could have occurred or something like that, but like, Steelshanks is clearly proving himself to be the best Bolton commander in a tournament setting, and it's not even close. Let's go find those other Bolton commanders. Where are they? 17 games for Roos with 4 wins. That's a comparatively abysmal, right? Like, Ramsey comes away, okay, we're only 3 games played and only 1 win. Like, oh, no. Steelshanks is proving himself to be the best commander. I believe the stats back this up as well. Just jump into stats here. Let's see who's the highest ELO between the 3. And look, there you go, Steelshanks, who is, repping a 61-62% win rate across the games he's being played in, across Boltons. That is that's completely serviceable. Steelshanks is fine. The other 2 commanders are trash. We're not going to talk too much about them. They are just not good. Darkstar at 15. Jaw Mormont comes in at 24 games. 58% win rate. Very respectable. Less than John, of course, in terms of games played. Lower win rate. Cool. Good. I'm glad that Jaw is being played and winning games. Good. Kevin. So here we go. Here's the first big one. Kevin has 106 games played, which is like, and that's without mirrors, right? Not including mirrors, and there would have been a lot of mirrors. I'm guessing a lot of Kevin's as well. That's a lot of games. That is a lot of games played. Obviously, in comparison to the overall data they think was worked out. It was going to be, I think it would be about 500 odd games across the weekend in terms of data. Maybe 600 games. I think it's closer to 600 than it is 500. Nearly 600 games worth of data. So, yeah, Kevin, nuts. His appearance rate is nuts. And if you don't know his appearance rate, see this last week, 35 of the 170 players picked Kevin. Now, quick maths here. I can't do 20% of 170 quick. But this is approximate. Yeah. 20% of 171 comes out to be 34.2. Now, let's assume this is a rounding error. And let's say this is 35 players, because you don't get to see it. That means that of the 35 players, Kevin appeared in a pairing on average once. Which is a good thing. He wasn't being picked as a... I actually do know some players did pick double Kevin. But over all of the players, he isn't being picked more than the number of players. We are not talking about the days of old of so here goes, Bloodraven's got double Kevin. We're not talking days of old of Mance or Offal. Not I don't think Offal was ever really a build. But you're not just picking the best commander twice. People on average are considering, yes, I'll take Kevin, he's probably my best option. But then actually having a different commander as an option as well. So that's a positive thing. It's a positive thing that he had for want of a better term, 100% appearance rate in Lannister kind of things, which is not true, but on average was always picked in a Lannister pair. But then his win rate is 57%, which is it's high. 50%, it's high, but it's not. 7% is yeah, whatever, you know what I mean? A 57% win rate really is just kind of sure, he's good. I have nothing more to say about that 57% win rate. He's decent. Great. Lancers are pretty good right now. Kevin is pretty good right now. Thumbs up. We see, just talking about Lancers as well, Gregor Clegane's up there with 92 games. 3% win rate. Great. Cool. No issues here. No concerns. Completely fine. No concerns. 29 appearances for Gregor as well, so not quite once in every pair of Lannisters, but a lot of Lannisters running Gregor. So far, so good. Apart from for Bolton's. Bolton's pretty sad. Stannis Baratheon we see for the most pick Baratheon commander in Rightful Heir at 14 picks and played 56 games with a 54% win rate. Well done, Stannis there. Cotter Pike, another high one at 88 games with a 53%. Cool. A load of people in the middle. Harmonulla, Steer with an exactly a 50%. Love it. Harmonulla's had a bit of resurgence. I think for a long time people just stopped playing Harmonulla, and I was like, you wonder why. Like, you didn't see Harmonulla as often. People had deviated to more like the Dark Stars and their Oberyn list, and the Daemon list. But like, Oberyn and Gerald did well. Relatively small sample sizes did well, but like Harmonulla doubling the sample size, 53% is still great, right? Harmonulla still perfectly playable into the game, into the meta. So yeah, it sounds weird. Like, I know Harmonulla was like the top rated commander for a while. I'm glad that the relatively small touch they made to him has made him still playable and still decent, but not like complete garbage tier trash. So the touch was probably the right level. Certainly with the way the meta is. Let's see, anyone else big? So you got selection of like 30s to 40s here, or 20s to 30s. All just below 50% win rate, but again, like 45 to 49% win rates here, no issues. We then start moving into the little bit of sadness. Loras down at 20 games played, 35. Bit sad. Renly, 38%. Not amazing. Damon Sand, who we all thought was decent, 29% over 24 games. Yeah, 24 is not a huge number of games, not in the grand scheme of things at all, but 29% is pretty sad. This is the one I wanted to talk about though. Maeve Mormont. Only 16 games, so again, relatively small sample size compared to the 100 games of Kevin. But like, she won one game. Won one game. That's abysmal. Like, we're not talking about like one player, and like all of these could have just been like one player repping the list once or twice, or a few times across the event, and it is more indicative of like one player. This is 16 games. This is a minimum of 3 players playing this. Let's have a look at Mage's appearance rate. So 4 players. Okay, 4 players. Nah. Not many, but Mage, still not great. Not having a good week at all. I wonder how she's doing in the actual overall ranking. Because a lot of people had said she's great, and I don't think she's trash. She's still the second highest rated commander in Starks, which is super interesting. It's really interesting to me. She's the second highest rated commander in Starks, and the Stark players, which there's 10% of the tournament are playing Stark, and we see Great John Umber being the most picked, which is not a surprise, highest rated commander and decent. Rob and Eddard all being picked over Mage. So, although Mage is statistically the second best commander in the faction if we follow the overall power rankings, in Poland, they are not seeing a Mage Great John Umber pair as being particularly powerful, and those that are then not clearly not getting a huge amount of success out of that Mage list. So it might be just that Great John Umber and Mage Maeve, however you pronounce it, run very similar lists. And so the problem is that you end up with basically the same list twice. And in that case, you just want to run Great John because at least he bursts things, maybe? I don't know. But Maeve Mormont is that's a sad day at the office for Maeve Mormont. But yeah, overall, like, the actual like win rates, even this, like, this is bad. This is not a good weekend, but not like really bad. Damon Sands is like worse, right? Damon Sand is at 30%, 24 games is worse, but it's still not really terrible. It's all fine. You know, I think it's fair to say that John, Kevin, probably your 2 best commanders in those respective factions. But like we said, overall those factions aren't overly performing. They're just the 2 best commanders in the 2 best factions right now. That's about it. Like, there's no issues there. However, Old record here. This list was played every game. GCS. Gratka. Oh look, there's a unit of GCS. And what's in his other list? No GCS. He run the Kevin list. He did run the Kevin list. 1, 2. He ran the Kevin list 2 games. They're in his Gregor most of these games, and Gregor had GCS in it. Let's have a look. Golden Company Crossbowman. Appreciate that. And GCS. Okay. 4th player. Like this list. Makes me happy. I like this list. This is... I don't even know if this list is particularly good. But Zia, however you pronounce it, Damien. I like your lists. I appreciate your lists, even if they're not very good. They're the kind of things I enjoy running. This definitely. Double cav. Oh, bring me some more cav. All cav Martel is the way I go. Anyway, GCS in the aero list, right? I assume he ran both lists. Gerald. He didn't run. He actually didn't run his Doran Martel list with aero. He only ran his Gerald Dane list. I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. Thumbs up from me. Where we got GCS. GCS. Greyjoys. Running GCC, but not GCS. GCS not appearing. Greyjoys is not overly uncommon. Interesting that the best performing Greyjoy did have them. Let's have a look at Kosa's list. None there. None in that list. There's one more there. Size Match doesn't have them in that list. It doesn't have them in his Cotter list either. So he doesn't run any GCS, which I appreciate. I do recommend looking at Size Match's John list. It's very interesting. It was a John 8, but differently. Yeah, John 8, but different. Benio didn't run. Oh, he did with his Stannis Rightful Heir. We're down to number 10 here. And we see no GCS. So GCS are appearing in, roughly speaking, 50% of the list. I haven't done exact counting there. If anyone has. But of the 20 lists there, you're looking at about a 50% appearance. This is obviously still a concern, right? This is still a concern. It's still an issue that is still like the most commonly appearing unit, and it is the one that is doing best. I also think it's probably worth noting that we see, again, not broken, but it's just Varys. Baelish. I didn't run the Baelish list, but Varys. Varys. Run this list, but Varys. Oh look, Peter Baelish. Fair enough. Doesn't run Varys. You can see where I'm going with this, can't you? Varys. And Baelish. Varys. Oh look, it's a nice watch. Varys. No Varys. Oh. Is that a list? Seismic did play his Cotter list as well. Yeah, cool, good. Jaqen. Well, I didn't actually look at his NCUs here. I appreciate that, Wadzu. I pronounce it. Varys. Varys appears in like of the top 10. You know, we could look further down because there's a lot of other players at like 1 or 2 losses. 2 losses. But the top 10 here is all players with no losses or 1 loss. Or in the case of Gratka, he had 1 draw. But like the no losses to 1 loss bracket, and basically every single list had Varys in it, and that's not list pair. Every list, like what? We've got like 3 lists that maybe didn't have Varys in across 20. Like, is that an 85% appearance rate for Varys in good performing lists? I don't think Varys is broken. Like, sounds crazy. His appearance rate is that high. I don't think Varys is broken. But combined with GCS, and we kind of joke about it, and I see people say it a lot, like, it really does feel like if you just come to the game as like you do not know what you want to build as your list. Like you have no concept what faction you want to build, what you're trying to build with the objectives of the list, or anything like that. It almost feels that for the vast majority of players and for list building and factions, the first thing you do is you go, put Varus in my list and GCS. And those GCS might come out at a later date. Like they might get replaced with something different. An in-faction unit, SM, Swarm Brothers, though I don't think Swarm better necessarily. They do get synergy with Night's Watch cards. But like Swarm Brothers or Shadow Tower Spearmen, or something like that. Like Hunters, right? There are options. But nearly always you start with that's probably going to be a unit. And the Varus thing is crazy. It's crazy the appearance rate of Varus. I haven't gone through and checked all 342 lists, right? I don't have a way of scraping that easily either. But I would love to know the number of lists Varus was at this event. I think it's probably quite high. Now, if someone wants to particularly find that out for me or do that kind of like deeper analysis, back in the days where I used to manually type in lists into a spreadsheet and be able to produce statistics for individual components like this, just based off one event, I would have done it, but I am far too lazy and busy now to do that kind of shit. Varus's appearance rate is too high. And he's not broken. That's data actually says it there. Varus isn't broken. GCS probably isn't broken, but the prevalence isn't great for the game. Yes. Varus could easily have gone down to 3 tokens, and I still think you'd probably pick him. I really do think you'd probably still pick him, but maybe then becomes a bit more of a debate with the other faction NCUs you've got. GCS, again, like they're not overly good. Maybe tone down the order, whatever people want to do. I'm not necessarily saying these are good suggestions, but like, or bring the other 7-pointers in these factions up to a comparable level. Make people feel like there is a good choice. And the problem is, even though I personally think there are good and interesting choices in the 7 slot in faction, the vast majority of players kind of either they see it and they choose not to bother with it, or they just don't see it and they just go, sod it, I'm just gonna pick. Right? GCS and Varus, sorry, not Faramir, and Varus are the highest rated things in the game, and they are too commonly picked, is the problem. It's not actually that they're winning too often. It's not necessarily that they're busted or broken. It's just that that their appearance rate is too high. We saw this with old Walder and Varus back in those days of like their appearance rate, even though like they weren't necessarily bustedly strong. You know, we can argue about Walder being really good into like the wolf meta, and Varus being incredibly good into the replacement tactic zone meta type thing back in the wave of 1.6, right? Very strong pieces. Everyone agrees that Walder and Varus back then were strong, but they weren't like ridiculously dumb, not super OP. They were in fact neat in the way the game was played back in 1.6. And they had, comparable appearance rates, at least on quick observation. We saw Baelish in 2021, right? Baelish in 2021, for season 1, Baelish's appearance rate was like sky high, right? It was silly how often Baelish has been picked. And to some extent, we saw it a little bit in season 1 and season 2, to some extent. And like, Baelish finally dropped off his appearance rate a little bit when he got changed to 3 tokens rather than just every time. And even then, he was still picked a lot. You always want to touch these things that have such a high appearance rate, especially if they're neutral. You want to touch them because it probably means they're just de facto better than in factions, right? If Varys was a debate of like, do I pick Varys or I'm picking an NCU out off the top of my head here, but like 4-point Oberyn NCU, it would be like, oh, do I pick Varys or is Oberyn better? How does my list want to play? And like you have that conversation with yourself. I think that's interesting. But like the vast majority of players and unfortunately factions just look at most of your NCUs and go, this is just better. Will give me value way more often. So Varys and GCS, not a surprise to anybody, are still appearance rate ridiculously high and not necessarily win rate high, but just doing well, making the backbone of nearly those 11 points that make up nearly any list. I think we looked at. I know that Carlo had said that previously with the likes of French nationals. I think it was when he was on talking about French national rep for kind of London, and it was kind of true again in London, where again a lot of those run those kind of things. Evil Sponge says Qyburn versus Varys. Is there even a debate? No, like that. It just isn't a debate of Qyburn versus Varys, and like that's just a really good example of like Qyburn is an in-faction NCU that works in a similar way, not the same way, but a very similar way to Varys working, and Qyburn is generally speaking considered shite, completely shit. And it's very similar in terms of his mechanic, but it's the effects that he brings are just bad. Or just not as good. Yeah. Oh well. Yeah, and you can't have one if you can't have them both in your list. I know, right? Because that would be broken. Apparently. Qyburn was supposed to be a budget Varys, then Varys was changed to be the same price. Maybe. I don't know. Qyburn's just bad. Wouldn't even take him to unlock Silent Night Gregor, would you either? Anyone forgets? Anyone remember this guy? Silent Giant Robert Strong? Resilience and Unstoppable Wrath? No, so actually just bizarrely sad. Unstoppable Wrath on these things hasn't changed, so it's just the +2 wound. Similarly with the mounted +2 wounds and the uncontrollable, and the non-mounted +2 wounds. And then the commander version has the Thundering as well. I don't know if you'd give them all Indomitable. I don't know about that. I feel like you could probably buff those 2 and 3 point attachments to have Sundering as well. And I don't think it would make them oppressive. The weird thing where they've made the commander playable, and like the commander is good now. He's proving to be good overall. But yeah, just a small tweak on those attachments. Maybe. They want to make attachments more playable. 2 and 3 points would make them down. So yeah, like overall, the stats are pointing to the game being relatively balanced. There are very few major outliers, and it's in a good spot, right? Except for neutrals, kind of dominating list building a little bit, and clear in faction. It's actually really interesting. One of the few things I've said about Night's Watch for a long time is that the commanders in Night's Watch don't feel overly impactful. Like the commander choice actually feels like it should be one of your most impactful choices. In Night's Watch, it kind of doesn't. It does, but it kind of doesn't as well. Certainly when I've tried to think about Night's Watch. But like in Lannisters, like your commander choice makes a big impact on your list. I think it does in Free Folk. I think it does in Baratheon. I think it obviously in Baratheon, the dual loyalty. I think it does in Stark to some extent. I think it does in Greyjoys. Maybe like a lot of these factions are still going to default to those 11 points, even though that they're picking different commands. So yeah. Interesting nonetheless. Biggest event ever, and it is proving that the game is, generally speaking, very healthy spot, with realistically only Boltons and factions we care about needing some kind of uplift. Overall, though, good event. Well done. There's a few things I want to point out. So obviously, well done to Palmerno for winning it with Greyjoys. The first Greyjoy player to win a GT, I think, or a GT-sized event. I think, yeah. Or like I say, GT. I should call it a GT, a national size event. So like, first Greyjoy player to win a 60+ man event, 4-player plus. I think, yeah. So congratulations there. Congratulations to other players. So Powell, I can't pronounce, but Powell with Baratheons getting 3rd place, respectable. Good to see Martell's up there. Lannisters, quite a lot of Lannisters in the top 10. Greyjoys, Night's Watch, another few Baratheons as well, actually making the top 10 as well. So it's a healthy mix of what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 factions in the top 10. And then you move into like the kind of 2 loss bracket, which goes all the way down to like Tom Can in 38th place, and it's like Free Folk, Stark, who weren't represented in the top 10, Targ, Neutral, Bolton, right? Every faction has got somebody with a minimum of 2 losses represented across the event. So that's a good thing. That is a good thing. It's proving that you can do well. You only need like 1 or 2 of those games to go slightly differently, and all of a sudden you're up here, right? And a lot of those games I imagine would have. So, congratulations to all those players. And like the game is in a relatively healthy spot. Changes are obviously welcome. Changes are always welcome. But the game is good. Outside neutrals. Let's have a look. I haven't really been reading much of the chat. Most factions don't have super compelling 7-point infantry options to go against GCS. Yeah, generally speaking, they don't like. The actual sad one is Starks, right? Because Starks have Franigman Bog Devils, who at 7 points are like okay, scout openings, like 5 armor, 5 morale, mark targets as well, or like sort of great. The poison mechanic's interesting, but like the rest of that loadout is just like not that interesting. So yeah, like Franigman Bog Devils are a choice, but I think you probably only ever put them with like Rob, maybe Howland, but like yeah, they're just not very comparable with GCS, unfortunately. And like Great Axes at 7 are like virtually unplayed. Which is, that's the other 7-point melee infantry unit they have. And that's like literally virtually unplayed in a competitive scene. I've not seen a Great Axe unit on the field in a long time. So Starks are a very good example of that. Targs, some Targ players prefer to run GCS over Unsullied, which is sad. It's 2 units of Unsullied that you're picking them over. What else have we got? They're picked over Warrior Sons now a lot more actually. So you don't see Warrior Sons nearly at all in Lannister. When don't think they've changed much. Oh, getting buzzed from work team. Yeah, so I don't know. I do agree. Mutes the other factions. game a bit of a neutral wash. Perfectly balanced as all things. So happy they got rid of insignificant raiders. Playing Varamir Mag with 4. Yeah, I mean whatever. I didn't understand why it was ZZZZ. Is that thing? I'm glad. Like I'm super glad they got rid of insignificant. I like. It's weird. Like I know that people were winning because of insignificant, but hopefully one of the things. I don't know if I was able to prove it or like if I genuinely when I believe it. Like I don't think genuinely good free foot players weren't relying on insignificant. I don't think really. It was always like other issues, like definitely back in the day of Mance, for example. Um, Insignificant was a cherry on the top. I'm glad they removed Insignificant, and like, I'm glad they removed Insignificant from the game. Those spam lists, I never enjoyed, and never really. I didn't enjoy running someone like running 6 raiders. I always thought it was like shit. It those go away, and then like like the Varamir animals with 4 units of raiders kind of thing is gone. Which are all good things. Like these are all good things for the game. Because overall, while we can argue from a balance perspective, was insignificant, balanced or not, answer probably not. A change is only good if it makes more people happier with the game, as well as in theory, if it makes the game more balanced as well, that is also a really positive thing. But like, people will be happier, generally speaking, if the game is more balanced, right? People are happier if the game is more balanced. People are also happier if things that make them feel bad are removed. Insignificant on Raiders made people feel bad. It also made the game more balanced, probably. The problem is it's hard to, in isolation, that change wasn't done. Hard to really evaluate that one change. But let's face it, like Free Folk are not being the dominant force that they were for the last few things. And if we look at like unit wise, this is the first time we've seen Raiders not just the best unit in Free Folk. In fact, they're the worst unit in Free Folk now, which is like a good thing. That's what you want. You know, I say you don't want them to be the worst, but you don't want them to be running away the best thing, which is what they were. So it's a good thing Insignificant's gone, and I'm glad it has, because it means that people who are not very good at Free Folk can't lean on it. It means I can't lean on it as a Free Folk player. I've had to get better. But like I don't think I ever really truly leaned on it in the way that some people seem to suggest that others did. That's just personally. Do I think Free Folk Raiders deserve a buff with losing as one? No, I don't. What buff would I want to give Raiders? Like remove the -1 from morale damage or the extra wound? Sorry, I don't know. Don't think so. Give them 6 morale as like a small improvement? No. Like more dice? No, that's definitely not the solution. Like at all. Giving them more dice is definitely not good. Giving them what? 4 armor? No, that's not good. Like the problem is like none of the stats that they have, like objectively none of the stats they have are things I'd want changed, because I think if you gave them any of those stats were better, they'd just I would just be like, oh god, these are amazing, pretty amazing again myself. Yeah, I think Raiders are fine. I think Raiders are fine. Like, I don't have an issue with Raiders. I think they're fine. Like, if you I don't know why you'd want to change them. I don't know. It's okay that Free Folk aren't that great. You know what I mean? Like, win for me because it means I can play Free Folk without people's ire. Not like I cared when, well, I care a little bit when constantly went on about it, but like, you know, they're not even bad. Like Free Folk are what 5, 10 points off Baratheon. Yeah, no issue at all. Free float raiders are fine. Don't need to change. How do you find the lists for an event like this on the website? Says Hoss. For lists, as in like these lists, on your power rankings page, if you've never logged a game, totally just gave my email address out to loads of people. You can't access it, so you have to log in. I'm trying to think. Do I have a? I don't have a burner account that hasn't logged any games, so I can't actually show you what that looks like. But yeah, it will say you haven't logged a game. If you haven't logged a game on the stats site, this page will be blank and says, "Oh, you haven't logged a game yet. You can't see this." And if you want to see lists from a tournament, you have to find the tournament in the finder. I recommend just opening all of the Control F, find the country of the event or the name of the event. That's usually a good idea. Or if you know the date, actually, here's another thing you can do. If you know the date the event started, ended, you can just Control F and type that in. So like Oct 22, and I just bang close championships because I know it ended yesterday. So I can see that there. Searching by date. Give raiders the cold hands treatment, nerf them to 5 points, go to 3+ armor, and an 876 attack profile. No data. No. That would be horrible for everyone. They don't respawn when they die. Oh wait, they do. Yeah, cool. So, biggest event ever, and from all intents and purposes, nothing really is an outlier. Outside of Varus and GCS appearance rate spoken about. There's no major outliers. Kevin at the moment, where we at? Lannisters and Night's Watch are now vying for top with Martell in close third. Greyjoy's kind of hovering at 10, but they've been up as high as Night's Watch, overtaking them briefly. Like, the only real consistent thing is that Night's Watch are probably the best faction in the game. And they're consistently like the top. Basically, they don't drop lower than this really. Sometimes someone overtakes them, but they don't drop themselves. Night's Watch are probably the best faction in the game. Starks, unfortunately, they had a bit of a resurgence at one point. They're now kind of a bit doldrums down here. They're still not far off, but like they're not making it up. Similarly with Targs, Targs aren't jumping up a lot. For me, Targs and Stark probably are the worst factions outside Bolton's. Again, they're not far off from being completely fine, but Targs don't, like we said earlier, Targs just don't have an identity. Weird to build lists with, don't really have a direction. And Starks are just missing something maybe to make them tick a little bit more, but like people are getting success with Starks, they're not a bad faction at all. I think you know, the vast majority of these factions, Lannisters have been low down here, like -5, I think, not that long ago. The vast majority of these factions are well within the bounds of being like playable, with only really Bolton's being terrible, and only really Night's Watch being like the obvious best faction. But like the rest of the game, like when I say the Night's Watch are the obvious best, it's like Night's Watch are obviously the best faction, but that doesn't mean you just win games with Night's Watch all the time. It's like, oh yeah, you're like 55% win rate compared to everyone else's like 50 or good day or whatever. So actually look, Night's Watch are repping currently 57. Yeah, bit too high maybe, but like they're the best faction. They're not the free folk of old of like they're going to win every game or it's unplayable or anything like that. They're not the awful of old of being like you play into Night's Watch and you've just lost. Then there isn't any that currently. That's the truth of the matter. So yeah, that's where it stands. That's where it sits. And the event kind of backs that up in a lot of ways, right? There's not big faction outliers, really. Yeah. Nothing that's kind of like game breaking. You know, all of the things it points to is like Lannisters and Night's Watch are good at the moment, and they're also typically popular because they're good. Kevin is good. Gregor is good. John is good. But notice none of these are uber duper powerful. Like it's all just like they're fine, they're good, they're a bit above the average maybe. You know, Tywin's a little below the average maybe. Well, actually, according to this, Tywin's doing fine. Again, small sample, but like, yeah, there's nothing really concerning. And that's obvious. Like, if you listen to good players when they talk about the game, like when we talk about list building and kind of like building counter lists and this and the other, you are thinking about Night's Watch and Lannister. You are thinking about those matchups, thinking how do I beat like a John or Cotter list? How do I beat a Kevin list? How do I beat a Gregor list? Those are the things you are trying to beat with your list building. But you actually, like your list building pair will normally have an answer. Like it's not the times of old where your pair simply didn't have an answer. You now have answers. It's, you know, which is refreshing. It's good. Right, what we got? Starks have been the most units now, I believe, after the leak. Yeah, with the Winterfell Guardians coming out soon. Winterfell Guardians, whatever they're going to be called. Double-handed sword blokes. If you didn't see these guys, the art for these was released not too long ago, and they actually did a release image of them on the A Song of Ice and Fire Facebook page. So I will quickly load this up. If you haven't seen this, by all means. Okay. So this is the artwork that we saw not too long. I do apologise. Pardon me. This is the artwork we saw not too long ago, and we also saw the models now get released. And these are renders, of course, not the models themselves, but this is model renders. The Winterfell Guard. They are. We're expecting a heavy infantry, hopefully something that comes in at, I don't know. Obviously, we can talk about them being 5 or 6 points or whatever. But let's hope they come in at 7 points and contest with GCS and actually win out the contest, right? That would be good. So yeah. People are asking questions that I don't want to have to answer right now. Oh god. How do I deal with 3 silenced men throughout a game? How do I do against 3 Tully Cav armies? The answer is play the game, and I know that sounds like a real cop out, right? But like, a lot of the time, it's about understanding what the skew is, what they do, right? Like, in my head, an opponent's list has weaknesses. Every opponent's list has weaknesses. So if you want to beat a list, pick the list up you want to beat, and think through what it wants to do, and go and analyze what it's trying to do in terms of its win condition, the way it does damage, for example, or how many movement tools has it got access to. All of these kind of things. Go and actually look at what it does, and then think about like, what does it not do well? What does it suffer against? And then also think about like, what things can it not interact with very well? What does it not have much protection against? You know, a very basic example of one It's like a unit by unit analysis type thing. Riders of High Garden, right? Riders of High Garden, Baratheon, they have access to Stag's Wit, but like still one of the best things you can do is weaken them, because weakening in a 4+ to hit unit with Lance is like completely taking the sting out of that unit's tail. That's a very basic analysis point. You can't do that like and just say, oh well, Riders of High Garden in this list are I weaken them, because like they might have Shira running around, they might have access to whatever, but like the principle still exists. You can still do that analysis, but you need to have the full list in front of you, most likely. You can do it based on unit and then apply that logic to a list when you see a combination of those units, and that'll be fine. But generally speaking, you need to look at the list as a whole. And I think this is actually something that people really, really aren't doing, are doing. The best players in the game, I think, are doing this right now. I think Carlo did it for his list at LGT. I think that to some extent Keijo did it, thinking about what he was going to run into in Invitational. I think that to some extent Raul's done it with his Greyjoy list. Like, what they've done is they've looked at what people are playing. They're looking at what those lists typically look like, and then the kind of important variations, like the Tywins, the Corrins, those variations you expect to see that are powerful. And they are building lists designed to have game plans to beat those. So like, I can't comment on Carlo's reasoning, for example, behind some of his list choices, right? Because I don't know. I'm not him. If you hadn't realised. But for example, his Cotter Pike list, his John list is like the John 8, right? His Cotter list, he runs Cotter GCS, Cold Hands Vanguards, but then he goes to Gren Shadow Tower Spearman. I don't know why he's gone to Gren Shadow Tower Spearman, but then I think about it and I'm like, maybe he wants to use this against like a Lance Cav charge, where he wants to be able to go, I'm going to taunt your Lance Cav, you don't charge my Shadow Tower Spearman, who will probably survive. Can't Lance Cav charge even with a Tywin bomb and kill my GC? Because a Tywin bomb will switch me off, it'll turn off my order, I'll be vulnerable, dirty, 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 dirty. But then I've just weakened your Lance Cav charge, and that means that your Knights of Castle Rock have a weaken token on them, which means that I will most likely survive the charge. I don't know. I did not build Carlo's lists. He built them, he knew I wanted them. That's what I would guess, right? I think it's a reasonable guess. You know? Not perfect, but I think it's a reasonable guess and a reasonable assumption to make. You might in chat go, you're completely wrong. Mickey doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, probably say that anyway, regardless of whether I am right or wrong. But he might spread some light on why he thought that 8-point combination of units was what he wanted in this list. You know, Reapers with Dario. It's something I've seen before. It's not something I've seen run at a competitive level in an event, but I have seen that before. I think I saw it either at the ELO event, LGT. I have seen it. It might have just been in a random list I was looking at. Honestly, it might have just been me looking at Mikkel, watching it at Mikkel's. In Mikkel's list, saw this combination. No, I'll just check because I think I can't remember if I saw it in these lists or if I saw it in the hello. But I've definitely seen something very similar to it, if not that. And it might have been Mikkel's list running. With not Baylor, he'd been running it with a different commander. No, he's got on listed there, slightly different. Yeah, maybe I'm making it up. It's not something I was massively surprised by though myself. Yeah, and Data said someone was running Reapers with Dario recently. Yeah, so it's not a complete and utter shocking surprise. But it is interesting you don't see it. You haven't seen it in that kind of competitive list, and certainly not with Baylor before. But I had seen that 7-point combo before. But yeah, analyze your opponent's lists. Actually think about like what is it from your opponent's list that makes them bad, and then go from there. Right? Analyze what your opponent's doing, what they've got in their list, what is going on. Go from there. Because I was kind of saying it to Bob. Like Bob had been saying over the last couple of days. Bob had been saying, like in the run up to this weekend, I can't beat this Tully Cavalier, two-cut Tully Cavalier Dario list that just heals. It recycles the healing card, or not the healing card. Sorry, it uses Sansa to recycle Sellsword Bravado. Also, Bravado is a morale check, and the morale check can be done with the Tully Cavaliers to proc both Dauntless and Rally Banner from the Tully Cavaliers. So you heal 2, and then you recycle it with Sansa to use it more. You just heal and heal and heal and heal and heal and heal and heal, and you just simply your Tully Cavaliers just never die because you're weakening and panicking everything as well when you're healing. It's an interesting idea. I've seen it with like Great John and Norman as well, and he was like, "Oh, I just can't beat it," and I was like, "Can beat it. Like fundamentally, you can beat this list. It's possible to beat this. You just have to work out how or why." And you know, one of the things it's got like Eddard, it's got Varys, I think, and it's got Sansa. Or is it like Eddard, Sansa, Varys, I think is right. And I was just kind of like, well, it doesn't have Caitlyn, so like, just weaken his units. He doesn't have a way of removing the weakened tokens on the Tully Cavaliers, and that immediately makes those charges just less deadly. You're probably not losing a unit, and yeah, you're not going to kill him, but like, if you can play a sustained game plan into him, is he going to have that much damage to kill you? And if he doesn't, then if he's not on objectives, you can outscore him. And eventually you'll be able to kill, you'll wear down his Eddard tokens, you'll wear down his resources, you'll eventually get him to the point where you can kill him. He's only a 6 activation list. Will eventually have a board position that will favour you. So yeah, it's not really about like, can I just kill this in melee combat? But it's like, what are you going to try and do to beat it? Yes. Yeah, like Euron to steal the card after he plays it. With no intention of playing the card yourself. Oh, potentially, yeah. Sorry, I'm very tired today, guys. Yeah. Anyway, just a thought. Sometimes it's not about bashing things down. It's about having a game plan that's better than your opponent. And if your game plan is I'm going to outscore them, that's a fine game plan. And it makes people realize that they can't just run these kind of like very skewed or very kind of like, they're lists that are good in some theories, but in principle, they've actually missed some principles of the game that make them bad. And if you abuse those principles of the game, then you can actually get some mileage. All right then. All right. So the other thing we were talking about was the Cerberus events that have been being run. Big in Asia. We saw some in America happen, and we saw Sunday Slaughter and the Montana group where Data Link is based. They were all running a Cerberus event this weekend. And in case you don't know, right, it's the idea is fairly straightforward. You have 3 lists. They all have to be different commanders. And when you play a game, if you've already played that, you can't pick a list from a command you've already played. So if I'm just going to use an example, Greyjoy, Euron, Baelor, Asher. If I play Baelor round 1, I can't play Baelor round 2 because I've got Asher or Euron left. I then play Euron, so I have to play Asher round 3. And if the game went to 4 rounds, if you've had 4 rounds in the event, then I've played every commander, so I can pick whatever I want for game 4. At least that is like basically one version of the Cerberus or whatever you call it is. Works really well for like small events, 8 players, whatever you want to do, because 3 games makes sense. And it's fun for a smaller event as an occasional change of pace. Wouldn't do it often for a big event. I think this is for me. This is where I draw the line myself, and I'm like, no, like I get people. I'm not here to regulate your fun. People are allowed to enjoy it. Valimore, if you love the idea, absolutely fine, go for it. For me, no, I'm not interested at all. Like I enjoy the two-list format nature of this game. One of the really important things for me is list building and like comparing the two lists, finding out where the weaknesses and strengths of one list are to try and build a second list, with the intention of then building that list to have strengths and weaknesses, and then going into a game and looking at your opponent's two-list format, and then doing the list picking stage of the game and doing this analysis that I've just told you all about, of like, right, if you look at a list, you can work out how to beat it, this, that, and the other, what strategies you can do, what the weaknesses are, X and X and X. Pick out your second list for the one that you pick into that, first or second list. Have your list locking and list decision point in the game interesting. The Cerberus style event gets rid of that for me. Like, it just gets rid of that. In game 3, I'm analyzing 3 lists against my 3 lists, and I'm probably just going to pick my worst list. Like, in truth, in game 1, I'm going to pick my worst list. Not always, but like most of the time. Just, again, completely out of context. Because game 1 is probably where I'm playing the easiest opponent I'm going to play all weekend. Because in round 1, I'm not being matched up on player skill. I'm being just matched up on relative player performance, I should say, in the event. I'm just being matched up with completely random person A, which, unless I know it's someone good, like if we did it in our local area, right, and me and Carlo matched up round 1, me and Carlo, I'd like to think anyway, I'm going to have to pick a list that's good into what Carlo is running, and I'd like to think he'd pick a list that I've got, because like we're players in our local area who are now going to kind of have a good shot at each other. And that's probably going to be my hardest event of that 8-player event. Hardest game of that 8-player event. In our local area, right? The thing is, like, I'm just going to play my worst list round 1 because it's probably my easiest opponent. For the average player, it will be their easiest opponent. And then, like, I'm just playing 2-list format for game 2. Cool. And then in game 1, I'm forced to pick a list that may be really bad into my opponent. And then, like, the response, like, because I know they do this a lot in Asia, one of the responses are, oh, the feedback's been really good, they really enjoy it, and not many people run skew lists, a lot of people run really balanced lists. And then it was like, a lot of people run the same command, they run the same list, they just change out the commander, at which point I'm like, then what's the point? What is the point if all you're doing is running the same list with a different commander? That is genuinely a pointless format. It's a complete faux pas to believe that is somehow more interesting. Oh, it's more interesting because it's Tyrion commander, not Kevin. Why? Why is that more interesting? Why is it more interesting that it's a different commander in the same list? Oh, because, and the truth of the matter is, because I don't see Tyrion that much, because I don't often see this, and I'm like, cool. So not like not seeing stuff is what makes it interesting. Is that why Boltons are interesting? Because you don't see them perform at high tables. Boltons are therefore interesting. No, Boltons aren't interesting. Neutrals, they're not interesting. Like, they're not picked because they're not interesting. Like, Tyrion is not picked, or Tywin is not picked, or High Sparrow is not picked in Lannister because people think they're weaker and they're not that interesting. Whereas Gregor, people look at, and Gregor, people have always done this, Gregor, right? People have always looked at Gregor and went, this looks cool and interesting. Even when he was bad, Gregor still had a high play rate. Because people looked at him and went, this is cool and interesting. If people are genuinely making the same list with just a different commander, like, that should be evidence enough that the format's actually not doing what you think it should be doing. All you're seeing there is, oh, it just means people play different commanders. At which point you're like, great, fantastic. But people really love the format. Why? Because they play different commanders. Right, but if they just played the same list with a different commander, like you've just said, then they don't really like the format. What they like is they like the idea of the format, not the practicality of the format. And vice versa. If you run a good event, they're going to have enjoyed the event. Like the format, again, wouldn't have mattered to them if they're running the same list anyway with different commanders. The average player, they'll probably still enjoy the event. I'm glad you say that, Data. Same lists and different commanders didn't happen at your, and I'm glad because of that. But if that is the case, that's annoying. That is genuinely really. I think the other thing is like, I just don't like it because like, there's an interesting point. I have already said it. There's an interesting point to that stage of list picking and list building, and I don't necessarily think Cerberus makes about that too much more. And I also don't like the propensity to be able to skew things. Like, to run some hard skews that need certain tech to beat, like that's actually possible in this game. Yes, with play and things, like it is possible to run very teched lists, and if you don't have the tech to beat it in your remaining lists of your three, then that's a bit shit. And like, it says a lot when it's like, oh, we don't see skews that often in the 3-list format, and it's like, what? So you don't see the double Tully Cavalier skew with the massive healing, which is a form of skew. You don't see high activation free folk steer lists in that, which is a form of skew. You don't see the mag smash giant Faramir type, which is a form of skew. You don't see the War Machine builds in that from Night's Watch because that's a form of skew. You're like, you don't see any of these lists, which are, by the way, all completely like, some of them more so than others, but like these are all like competitively played normal lists in 2-list format, and you're saying we don't see any of those, then I'm like, well, then people aren't building good lists, are they? These are like objectively good lists that people are normally using, doing well with, and you're not seeing them, which means the lists are bad in the format that you've got. Personally, like, just think the format's not very good, and I think the format is. If people want to play it for fun, they want to play it for fun. I'm not here to regulate fun, right? I make that abundantly clear. But like, for me, it has no redeeming features. The one redeeming feature it has is if you've got people learning the game, it allows people to run different commanders and learn different, because they've got like, if you went to an event and like you played in a Cerberus event and your opponent was like, oh, I've never played against Tyrion before, I'd be like, oh, cool, so this is a benefit to you. But like, yeah, I also you have to remember, I'm very different. You know, there are some players here who are very, very different to a lot of others, in that like, played against every commander in the game. I've played every commander in the game. Played every faction in the game. I've played nearly every unit in the game. Like, it isn't interesting to me that you're running Tyrion. It isn't interesting to me that you're running this. Your whole list might interest me. It might be interesting if Tyrion is in like the Suns, got like Golden Company crossbowman with Kyburn 1-pointer, you know, whatever. Like, that kind of stuff might interest me, but like, just a different commander doesn't. And the thing is, most of these lists are not. They're not deviating from what is the normal stuff you see anyway. The fun local event at 8 players. There's an occasional change, yeah. Never run it for a 4-round big event. Yeah. They're using it for the 5-round Asia event for the Realm of Battles Asia. That is the format they're using for Realms of Battle Asia. You're going to get pick one of 3 lists, one of 2 lists, automatically must pick. For game 3, you have no choice in what list you have to run. So you don't know who your opponent is going into round 3. So you've got to pick a list for round 3 that's going to be working into basically every single thing in the game. Then game 4, you can pick all 3 lists again, and then game 5, you can pick the 2 lists you didn't pick in game 4. That's what they're doing for the Asia tournament. I don't care. I don't like that format myself. I don't think it's conducive to actually good play or players, or even necessarily that very good building. I don't get why it's popular. So yeah, no, nothing for me. Sorry, doesn't do anything for me as a player. If people enjoy it, people enjoy it. If you want to play it, play it. By all means. Just for me, nothing for me. Sorry. Yeah, you also banned the tops, didn't you? Later as well, which again is another impactful thing as well. And I'm going to have a lot of new players, so seeing more commanders played was good for them. Yeah, so again, for newer players, I could see the benefit because like them picking up and playing new commanders. Like if someone told me, oh, this is the first time I've ever played Tormund, they were like a free foot player, and it's the first time they'd ever played Tormund, I'd be like, yeah, brilliant, it's fantastic. If the tournament encourages that, that's a good thing. I will always say, actually, one thing that I always say to people when they pick up a faction for the first time. I used to say like, oh, this is a really good list, why don't you try this, whatever. But like, I'm much more of a fan of newer players now, just giving them the advice of just play what you enjoy, play what you like the look of, and experience the faction. Because when you first start out experiencing all the commanders, your variation units, like it's no good me coming along and telling you R'hllor Faithful aren't very good. Right? That doesn't help you know the game better if I just say R'hllor Faithful aren't very good. I can explain why they're not very good, and that might give you further kind of ideas. Or you can start to go, right, well, I've just played a few games of A Song of Ice and Fire. I want to like think about why Faithful might be good or bad in a list. And then you do your own analysis of the unit and go, actually, you know what? When I get charged by like Lance Cavalry, I'm probably just gonna like get really hurt or die, and then my ability's not really gonna come off very often. So maybe this 6-point unit isn't very good. And I'm like, yeah. Or also, like, if I just get shot a lot, maybe this dies from getting shot and therefore is like worse, and maybe that's not very good. And I'm like, yeah, these are all reasons why you do not want to run your like Faithful, for example. So yeah. This is not 40k. Play the characters and factions you like. We'll excel at something. Yes, that's the other thing as well. Like, play stuff you enjoy and like. If you're a new player, play stuff you like, right? If you're an experienced player, also play stuff you like, obviously. But if we're talking about competitively, different matches, play stuff you enjoy. Even competitively, I've always played stuff I enjoyed. Like, I've never gone to an event with a tournament. That's a lie. Actually, that is a lie. Lied to you there. I've played one event with lists and a faction that I didn't. And I performed badly. I ran in the second team tournament, 2021. Awful was awful. And I just kind of went, fine, whatever. I'll just, what faction team want me to play? Well, you're free folk, or we haven't got a Night's Watch player. I was like, well, I'll take Night's Watch, run awful, and I ran a lot like an awful job there or something. And I actually just didn't enjoy running the awful, which is weird because like the awful list was objectively strong. Objectively, awful was like the best commander in the game, in fact, and I was losing games with the best commander in the game, which like is bad, right? I was like, shit, maybe I'm shit at this game. And what I actually realized, genuinely, like, just didn't fucking care. I was running a list and a faction that I just didn't enjoy playing, and I wasn't enjoying it. And yeah, for me that was a big switch off, like almost switch off. I didn't really want to do it because I just didn't enjoy it. Ironically, I had more fun playing the John list in that event. I didn't play the John list very often, but I had more fun running the John list because I felt the John list was something at least that I built and put together as like a counter to something. And I found it more fun because it was something that I'd kind of put together. Whereas the author list, it was like, oh, I'll just pick all this and whatever. So yeah, like I'm. That is the one time I played something I didn't enjoy, and I definitely learned that lesson of just I'm just not gonna do that again. I'm only gonna play stuff I actually. So yeah. Yeah. Data's like, I always enjoyed and done well with maneuver stuff. I got worried that Vic was the top Greyjoy commander. Took him to Grenats. He isn't my style. You went 0-2 with Vic and went 4-0 with Theon. Yeah. Even if you lost with Theon, right? You enjoy playing Theon. You enjoy kind of like going through that, so you're more likely to. Yeah. Right. There was one last thing. That did grace the internet before we finish for the weekend. Finish for the week. Sorry. And in case you didn't see it, we have now seen the back of the Neutral Heroes 3 box. So in case you haven't seen this, whip it up. The 7 minis being Shay, the Widower, Jaqen, Arya, Sandor, Rouge, and Biter. The important thing here, so let's go through them all basically. There's going to be 8 attachments, 1 NCU, and 6 tactics cards. So what we can deem here is one of the 8 attachments is Commander, with 6 tactics cards. So there's only 1 Commander in the box. 8 attachment cards. We'll sideline the Commander one for a minute and the NCU. Well, the NCU we'll tackle first, actually. The NCU with almost a shadow of doubt is probably going to be Shay, which is not a surprise to anyone. Shay NCU makes a lot of sense from who the character is and kind of like the impact she has. Certainly never in any fight. So that leaves us with the 8 attachments, and there are 6 models among the other things available. Arya, Sandor, Rouge, Biter, Jaqen, and the Widower. That's 6 attachment cards, meaning that there are now 2 left. 2 attachment cards left. It could be Shay as an onboard attachment as well, or like an enemy unit attachment similar to Arya or something like that. Don't know. The Commander, we think at this time is most likely going to be the Widower, who is the second in command to Dario and the Stormcrows. Jaqen was also a commander in the Stormcrows. He was commander of the Archers, whereas the Widower was commander, like second in command to Dario. So yes, Valimort, no Golden Company commander. There you go. That's what's in the box. That's what you're going to get. We don't know exactly kind of like the other stuff and how it's all going to align. We'll see how this box influences the game. It's a neutral box. The problem is with any neutral box, like, if there's a commander in here who has like a dumb card, for example, like, this is a really good example, would be like, imagine the commander in this box had an adaptive style type ability, but on like a card or like their attachment. Game completely kind of changes the way you think about it and like list building and things like that. Like the commander attachment matters a lot, and the commander tactics cards can matter a hell of a lot. We will see. We will see. I hope they're not. I hope they are not oppressively good or blatantly strong. Adaptive style attachments, data link thingy. Yeah, like imagine that. Imagine adaptive style attachment for like 1 point. It would be like, oh my god, what have you done? What have you done? We all ran 11 points of neutrals, and now we can run either 5 or 12. Oh god. Don't want that. I just put adaptive style on my silenced men for the whole game. Everyone's dead. What else would you do? I put adaptive style on my great axes. Adaptive style on warrior sons. Wow, chef's kiss. Adaptive style. I'm obviously not saying that this is definitely a thing. Like, let's see. That put them on 4+, no 3+ for adaptive style, and then they're like 4 base morale or 5 base morale. I haven't seen them in 5 base, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's just like running GCS. You just put them at a 3+, 4+, 3+, 3+ with the battle prayer. And because that's not an order, you can use the order aggressively. So 10 dice on 3s with sundering and reroll and precision. Basically GCS. What? That's not broken. I'm waiting for that promo Vargo Hope. Show him off again before you end. Oh, I would, Anthony, but because I'm still packed up, I actually don't know where the Vargo is. He's in one of the boxes down there, I think, or he's in one of them. And I'm not unloading boxes. Find a Vargo Hope. Unfortunately, Anthony, I can't do that today for you. That would be exactly 12 points of neutrals. The GCS Varus seems almost fated, said Post. Yeah. Every attachment gives precision, says Evil. Probably. The extra cards are Targ version commanders. There aren't extra cards. There are 6 tactics cards. If there are 6 tactics cards, there aren't Targ tactics cards. Right? Because then there'd be at least 12, if not 14, because of the one replacement. Maybe there's an attachment card which is Targ only attachment, maybe? Yeah. Or like the Targ version of the attachment. Because it's Stormcrows. I hope we get that sound effect to go with. I don't know which one you mean, but sure, Brute. Oh well. I need to AWOL right now. Alright then. So we will leave it there for today. Thank you very much everyone for tuning in. Just under 2 hours of live time. I'll be back next week with the Rotterdam White Scars. Specifically, I know Tice is going to be on and talk about the game a little bit more. Talk about like the various different things. Talk about his experience of LGBT, all of that kind of stuff. And then we'll see where the kind of take us. Yeah, we'll see how it all unfolds over the next kind of couple of months. I hope you enjoy your games. I really hope you enjoy all your games and enjoy playing the game. The game is fun. I enjoy it right now. Ironically, I don't enjoy talking about the balance that much and like thinking about the game that much. I just enjoy playing it. So yeah, I'll still talk about it forever though. I'm a loudmouth who can't shut his mouth. So yeah, let's have a look at what tournaments we have got this week. I got a request to talk about LVO. LVO tickets are live. Have been live for a little while, and they have 16 left. 16 left to reach the fated 48 that they had available. I think they're at 30 players now. So do buy your tickets if you are interested for LVO happening in January of next year. Go along, enjoy yourself at LVO. LVO's had a history of being like quite a good event for the guys down in the US. So if you can get an opportunity to go along, get yourself along. And yeah, gonna be awesome. We also have, as announced today, actually, the King in the North 4th edition has actually increased its player capacity. So this is the King of the North 4th edition in March of next year, happening in Santander, Spain. They've increased their capacity from 64 to 84. 20 extra players. How are they doing at the moment? They are on 67 people signed up as well. They're already full, and they've got a big old waiting list as well. So if you want in on the Spanish event, do check it out. There's a few Ender and like the Baroteo guys are going along by the looks of it. French, Italians as well. If you want a chance to go along, get yourself involved in that massive Spanish event that's happening, by all means, do sign yourself up soon. That's the King of the North, and or El Rey en el and LVO as well. Other events then. What other events have we got coming up? We have got anything this weekend? We missed it. We've got an event in Russia. Cool. Can't read any of it. Apologise. An event in Germany. The 5th Saxony Masters. Oh, it's good to see the Saxon group keep going along their tournaments. A 30-point event, a small event in Gdansk, Poland. They just don't have enough. Wardens of the Midwest's October event at Games Plus in Mount Prospect, Illinois. 16-player event happening there. We also have the House of Badger 4th event in the House of Badger series at Hobby Badger Games in West Sacramento, California. Trond Ludwig VIII in Belgium happening this weekend as well. And also Le Trond de France. Cool. An event happening as next week. Cool. So, what, 1, 2... Trond de France? I don't actually know running this or what this is about or where this is based in France. That might be the new French. Might be doing a French league season or something. Yeah, I think I know what that is. Anyway, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 events happening this weekend. So a bit of a quieter week compared to what we've had in recent weeks. But overall, hopefully everyone playing enjoys their games. Have a bit of a rest week from and enjoy what you've got coming on. So thanks a lot for tuning in again, guys. Hopefully next week I'll be a bit more unpacked with maybe a desk here or something that I'll be able to do some stuff at. Otherwise, sad. And apart from that, see you next week. I think, yeah. And have a good one.
Ready? Aim!
There's too many!
Anyone see my mammoth?
Stubby!